The Alpha King had rejected 73 potential mates before her, each one paraded before him like prized livestock, their pheromones carefully cultivated, their bloodlines impeccable. He dismissed them all with the same bored indifference, his wolf silent as stone. But when the hidden Omega, disguised as a common servant, her scent suppressed by ancient magic, stumbled into the ceremonial hall with a tray of wine, everything shattered. The crystal goblets hit marble. The king's eyes bled gold, and for the first time in 3 centuries, the most powerful alpha in the paranormal world fell to his knees, his soul recognizing what his eyes could not see. His true mate had been hiding in plain sight all along, and the enemies who'd buried her identity would burn kingdoms to keep her powerless. The lunar court existed between worlds, not quite mortal realm, not quite celestial plane, but something older and far more unforgiving. Its crystalline spires pierced perpetual twilight, casting prismatic shadows across courtyards where silver-leaf trees grew downward from floating islands. Here, hierarchy wasn't merely social structure, it was biological destiny, written in the very marrow of every wolf-born creature who walked its halls. Sera had learned this truth before she could walk. She moved through the servant corridors with practiced invisibility, her steps silent on stone floors, worn smooth by centuries of subordinate feet. The tray in her hands, polished silver, heavy with ceremonial wine decanters, balanced perfectly despite the tremor in her wrists. Around her neck, hidden beneath the high collar of her grey uniform, a thin chain of iron and rowan wood pressed cold against her pulse point, the suppression collar. Every servant wore one, a reminder of their place, but Sera's burned differently, deeper, as though it fought against something that wanted desperately to break free. "Move faster, girl." Matron Vess's voice cracked like a whip from the kitchen archway. The head servant's face was all sharp angles and sharper judgment, her own collar worn like a badge of honor. "The mating ceremony begins in an hour, and if the Alpha King's wine isn't perfectly chilled, I'll have you scrubbing blood from the fighting pits for a month." "Yes, matron." Sera's voice emerged soft, carefully modulated, never too loud, never memorable. She'd perfected the art of being overlooked. The ceremonial preparation chambers buzzed with controlled chaos. Sera navigated through it like water finding cracks in stone, around the perfumers crafting pheromone enhancers, past the seamstresses adjusting gowns worth more than Sera would earn in 10 lifetimes, between clusters of high-born Omegas who preened and postured, each convinced they'd be the one to finally capture the Alpha King's interest. "He'll choose me," one declared, her voice dripping with confidence and expensive floral notes. "My bloodline traces back to the first moon. My pheromones have been refined since birth." "Bloodline means nothing if your wolf is weak," another countered, adjusting her corset to display the mating mark on her shoulder. Artificial, Sera knew, painted on by skilled artists to mimic the real thing. Power recognizes power. King Theron hasn't accepted a mate in 3 centuries because none have been worthy. 3 centuries. The number hung in the air like smoke. King Theron Ashenblade, Alpha of the Lunar Court, Supreme Commander of the Northern Territories, Keeper of the Old Laws. He'd ruled since before Sera's great-great-grandmother was born, his power so absolute that even other alphas bowed without question. Unmated, untouchable, waiting for something none of these perfumed, preening Omegas could provide. Sera felt something twist in her chest. Not quite pain, not quite longing. The collar heated against her skin, and she forced the feeling down, down, down into the dark place where she kept all her dangerous thoughts. She was nothing, a servant, a shadow. She had to remember that. The grand ceremonial hall stole breath from even the most jaded observers. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into darkness, punctuated by floating orbs of moonlight, real moonlight, captured and suspended by ancient magic. The walls were living crystal that shifted colors with the emotional temperature of the room, currently swirling with anticipation. Silver, pale blue, hints of hungry crimson. At the far end, elevated on a dais of black stone veined with luminescent silver, sat the throne. And on that throne, radiating power that made the air itself feel heavy, sat King Theron. Sera had seen him before, of course. Glimpses in corridors, distant figures during court proceedings she'd served. But never this close. Never with his full attention turned toward the room, his presence pressing against every living thing like gravity intensified. He was beautiful in the way winter storms were beautiful. Deadly, inevitable, impossible to ignore. Dark hair fell to his shoulders, shot through with silver that caught the floating moonlight. His face was all brutal angles, sharp jaw, high cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. But his eyes, they were what made lesser wolves drop their gazes. Pure molten gold, ancient and knowing, holding the weight of centuries. Those eyes were currently glazed with boredom so profound it bordered on contempt. "The 74th candidate," announced Lord Castellan, the king's advisor, his voice magically amplified. "Lady Isadora Nightshade, of the Eastern bloodline, descended from—" "No." The king's voice cut through the introduction like a blade through silk. He didn't even look at the Omega who'd spent hours preparing, who now stood frozen in her ceremonial gown, her carefully crafted confidence crumbling. "Your Majesty, perhaps if you would allow—" "I said no." Theron's fingers drummed against the throne's armrest, the only sign of his irritation. "Her wolf is weak, her pheromones are artificial, and she reeks of desperation masked by expensive perfume. Next." The crystal walls flushed deep red, humiliation made visible. Lady Isadora fled, her sobs echoing. Sera watched from her position along the wall, where servants stood like furniture, holding trays of refreshments no one would touch. The collar around her neck pulsed with heat, and beneath it, something stirred. Something that had been sleeping for so long she'd almost convinced herself it didn't exist. Her wolf. Impossible. Servants didn't have wolves. The collars suppressed them, yes, but only if they existed in the first place. Sera was nothing. Had always been nothing. The matron had told her so every day since she'd been brought to the court as a child, too young to remember anything before. "You're broken," Matron Vess had said, not unkindly, just stating fact. "No scent, no wolf, no power, but you can serve. That's purpose enough." So why did her wolf suddenly feel so close to the surface? Why did every instinct scream at her to run, to hide, to get as far from this ceremony as possible? "The 75th candidate," Lord Castellan continued, his voice tight with frustration. "Lady Morgana Silvercrest of the—" The king waved a dismissive hand before she'd even fully entered. "No, her ambition outweighs her sense. She'd poison me within a year." Lady Morgana's face went white, then red. "How dare you—" "I dare because I'm king." Theron's voice dropped to a register that made the floating moonlight flicker. "And because I can smell the nightshade you've been building immunity to, hoping to use it as leverage. Get out of my sight." The ceremony continued its brutal parade. Omega after Omega presented, each one rejected with varying degrees of cruelty. The king's boredom deepened into something darker, a resignation that felt almost like grief. As though he'd given up hope of ever finding what he sought, Sera's hands trembled on her tray. The collar burned, and deep in her chest, her impossible wolf howled. Then the wine decanter slipped. It happened so fast. Condensation on silver, fingers that had held steady for hours suddenly nerveless. The crystal vessel tilted, and Sera lunged to catch it, her body moving on pure instinct. She caught it, but her momentum carried her forward, past the line of servants, past the invisible boundary that separated the invisible from the observed, directly into the Alpha King's line of sight. The world stopped. Later, Sera would remember it in fragments, the way every conversation died mid-word, the way the crystal walls flared brilliant white, the way the floating moonlight pulsed like a heartbeat. But mostly, she'd remember the king's eyes. They'd been gold, bored, ancient. Now they were molten, wild, and locked on her with an intensity that made her knees buckle. Theron rose from his throne, something he hadn't done for any of the 75 candidates. His nostrils flared. His hands gripped the armrest so hard the stone cracked. "You!" The word emerged rough, barely human. "What is your name?" Sera couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The collar around her neck was burning, actually burning, the metal heating to unbearable temperatures. She smelled smoke, felt something inside her rising, breaking, shattering. "Answer your king," Lord Castellan barked. "Sera," she whispered. "Just Sera. I'm no one. I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Take off the collar." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. "Your Majesty." Matron Vess stepped forward, her face pale. "She's a servant. The collars are permanent. They're not meant to—" "I said take it off." Theron descended the dais, each step deliberate. The crowd parted like water before a shark. "Now." I can't." Sera's voice broke. "It doesn't come off, I've never—" The king reached her. Up close he was overwhelming. Power and heat and something that called to every cell in her body. His hand rose and she flinched, expecting violence. Instead, his fingers touched the collar with surprising gentleness. The metal exploded, not metaphorically. The iron and rowan wood shattered into fragments, the suppression magic breaking with a sound like reality tearing. And with it, everything Sera had been forced to bury came roaring to the surface. Her scent hit the room like a tidal wave. Omega. Pure, undiluted, impossibly powerful Omega. But not just any Omega. Something older, rarer, moon-blessed. The kind of scent that appeared once in a millennium, that could bring alphas to their knees, that legends were built around. The kind of scent that could only belong to a true mate. Theron's wolf surged forward, his eyes bleeding completely gold, his canines extending. Around them, every wolf in the room, Alpha, Beta, Omega, dropped to their knees, overwhelmed by the sheer power of the mating bond snapping into place. "Impossible," someone whispered, but Sera barely heard it, because her wolf had finally broken free, and it was singing one word over and over, in a voice that rewrote her entire existence. Mate. The mating bond was supposed to be beautiful, at least that's what the old stories claimed. A golden thread connecting two souls, destiny made manifest, the moon goddess's greatest gift. What Sera felt was agony. Her wolf clawed at her insides, desperate to complete a bond that had been suppressed for so long, it felt like resurrection and death simultaneously. Every nerve ending screamed, her vision blurred, the grand hall spinning into fragments of color and sound. Through it all she felt him, the Alpha King's presence like a star burning too close, his wolf calling to hers with a ferocity that should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. "Impossible," Lord Castellan repeated, his voice cutting through the chaos. He'd risen from his knees, though his face remained pale. "Your Majesty, this must be some trick. A servant cannot be—" "Silence!" Theron's command cracked like thunder. He hadn't moved, his hand still hovering near where the collar had been, his eyes fixed on Sera with an intensity that made her skin burn. "Everyone out! Now! But Your Majesty, the ceremony is over." The king's voice dropped to a register that made the crystal walls shudder. "Leave, all of you." The grand hall erupted into motion. Rejected Omegas fled with barely concealed relief or fury. Nobles whispered behind jeweled hands, their shock palpable. Servants scattered like startled birds, Matron Vess shooting Sera a look of pure venom before disappearing through the service entrance. But not everyone left willingly. "You cannot be serious." The voice came from the crowd, female, cultured, dripping with disdain. A woman stepped forward, her gown the color of fresh blood, her dark hair elaborately styled. Lady Morgana Silvercrest, the Omega who'd been accused of carrying Nightshade. This creature has clearly used some enchantment. No true mate bond would manifest with a servant. "Lady Morgana," Theron didn't look away from Sera, "you have 10 seconds to leave before I forget the old laws forbid killing nobles without trial." "She's a nobody." Morgana's composure cracked, revealing the desperation beneath. "I am descended from the first families. My bloodline is pure. Whatever spell she's cast—" 8 seconds. Something in the king's tone made even Morgana's ambition falter. She retreated, but her parting words hung in the air like poison. "The court will never accept her. You'll destroy everything for a servant's trick." Then they were alone, Sera and the Alpha King, in a hall built for thousands, with only the floating moonlight as witness. Theron moved so fast Sera didn't see it. One moment he stood an arm's length away. The next, his hand cupped her face, tilting her chin up. His touch was surprisingly gentle, but his eyes were wild, his wolf barely contained beneath the surface. "How?" His thumb traced her cheekbone. "How did they hide you?" "I don't—" Sera's voice broke. "I don't understand. I'm just a servant. I've always been—" "You are mine." The words emerged as a growl, possessive and absolute. "My mate, my Omega. And someone has been hiding you from me for—" He stopped, his nostrils flaring as he scented her more deeply. "Moon's blood. How old are you?" 23, I think. Maybe 24. "I don't know exactly." 23 years. Something dangerous flickered across his face. 23 years you've been here, and I never knew, never scented you." His hand moved to her throat, fingers tracing where the collar had been. The skin was red, blistered, as though the metal had been burning her for years. "What did they do to you?" Before Sera could answer, the hall's grand doors burst open. Lord Castellan entered, followed by a contingent of the King's Guard, elite warriors whose presence meant official business. Behind them, moving with the careful grace of someone who knew their power, came a woman Sera recognized. High Priestess Ilara, keeper of the Moon Temple, interpreter of the goddess's will. "Your Majesty." Castellan's voice was carefully neutral. "Forgive the intrusion, but the court demands answers. If this girl is truly your mate, there are protocols." Protocols. Theron's hand remained on Sera's face, a clear claim. "My mate was hidden from me for over 2 decades, and you speak of protocols, which is precisely why we must verify the bond's authenticity." High Priestess Ilara stepped forward, her silver robes whispering against marble. Her eyes, one blue, one gold, a mark of her divine connection, fixed on Sera with unsettling intensity. "Forgive me, child, but the court will not accept a servant as queen without proof. There are concerns." "Concerns?" Sera found her voice, though it emerged shakier than she'd like. "I didn't ask for this. I don't even understand what's happening." "What's happening," Ilara said gently, "is that you've manifested as a moon-blessed Omega, the rarest designation, appearing perhaps once every 1,000 years. Your scent alone brought every wolf in this hall to their knees, and you've bonded with the most powerful alpha in the paranormal world." She paused. "Either you are the moon goddess's chosen, or you are the most sophisticated magical deception in history." The words hit Sera like physical blows. "I'm not deceiving anyone. I don't even have magic. I'm just no one," Theron finished, his voice soft but edged with fury. "That's what they told you, isn't it? That you were nothing, broken, powerless." His hand moved to her wrist, turning it to reveal the inside of her forearm. Sera gasped. There, where there had never been anything before, a mark was emerging. Silver lines that glowed with inner light, forming a pattern she didn't recognize, ancient symbols that seemed to shift and breathe. "A bloodline mark," Ilara whispered, her shock genuine. "But that pattern, I've only seen it in the oldest texts. The moon-marked line. They were thought extinct." "Extinct or hidden?" Theron's question carried weight. "Someone went to great lengths to suppress her nature. The collar, the servant's role, the complete absence of records, this was deliberate." "Your Majesty." A new voice, cold and calculating. A man emerged from behind the guards, tall, silver-haired, his face aristocratic and cruel. Lord Aldrich Nightshade, head of the High Council, one of the most powerful nobles in the court. "While this development is certainly unexpected, we must consider the political implications. A servant as queen would destabilize centuries of tradition. Perhaps a private arrangement could be made. The girl could be kept comfortable, hidden, while you select a proper mate for public." The temperature in the hall dropped 20 degrees. Theron moved with predatory grace, crossing the distance to Aldrich in 3 strides. He didn't touch the nobleman, but his presence alone made Aldrich stumble backward. "Finish that sentence," Theron said softly, "and I will show you exactly why I've ruled for 3 centuries, while nobles like you rise and fall like mayflies. I meant no disrespect. You meant to suggest I hide my true mate like a shameful secret, that I reject the moon goddess's gift for political convenience." The king's eyes blazed. "Tell me, Lord Aldrich, how long have you known about her?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Your Majesty, I have no knowledge of—" "You're lying." Theron's voice was conversational now, which somehow made it more terrifying. "I can hear your heartbeat, smell your fear. You knew something. Perhaps not everything, but enough." Aldrich's composure cracked. "The girl is a liability. Her bloodline, if it truly is moon-marked, carries power that could challenge the established order. Keeping her suppressed was a matter of stability. You admit it." The words were barely a whisper. "The council acted in the court's best interest. We couldn't allow an unknown variable to—" Theron's hand shot out, gripping Aldrich's throat. Not crushing, not yet, but the threat was clear. "You stole 23 years from my mate. From me. You suppressed her wolf, burned her with iron, forced her into servitude, and you call it stability. Your Majesty, please." Castellan stepped forward. "Lord Aldrich should face trial, not summary execution. The old laws demand justice." Theron released Aldrich, who collapsed, gasping. Very well, Lord Aldrich Nightshade. You are hereby charged with conspiracy against the crown, suppression of a moon-marked bloodline, and crimes against my mate. You will be held in the court's dungeons until trial. He turned to the guards. Take him, and find everyone who helped him. I want names. As Aldrich was dragged away, still protesting, Sera felt the world tilting. This couldn't be real. Hours ago she'd been invisible, a servant whose greatest concern was keeping wine chilled. Now she was apparently moon-marked, mated to a king, and at the center of a conspiracy that involved the highest levels of court power. I can't do this. The words escaped before she could stop them. I don't know how to be whatever you need me to be. I don't know anything about politics or power or... Sera. Theron was beside her again, his hands on her shoulders, grounding. Look at me. She did. And in his ancient gold eyes she saw something unexpected. Understanding. I know you're terrified, he said quietly. I know this is overwhelming. But you are not alone. You are my mate, which means you are under my protection. No one will harm you. No one will force you into anything. We will figure this out together. Together, Sera repeated, testing the word. It felt foreign. She'd been alone for so long. Together, Theron confirmed. Then, with visible effort, he stepped back, putting distance between them. But first you need rest, medical attention for those burns, and answers. He looked at Ilara. Take her to the Queen's chambers. Post guards. No one enters without my permission. The Queen's chambers. Sera's voice pitched high. But I'm not. You are my mate. That makes you queen, whether the court accepts it or not. His tone brooked no argument. We'll hold the formal bonding ceremony when you're ready. But for now you need safety. Ilara approached, her expression softer now. Come, child, let's get you somewhere quiet. As Sera was led away, she looked back once. Theron stood in the center of the grand hall, surrounded by floating moonlight, looking every inch the powerful, untouchable king. But his eyes followed her with an intensity that made her wolf sing. And for the first time in her life, Sera wondered if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't nothing after all. The Queen's chambers existed in a part of the palace Sera had only glimpsed while scrubbing floors. The royal wing, where even senior servants trod carefully. Now, escorted by the high priestess and flanked by guards whose armor bore the king's personal sigil, she walked those halls as though she belonged. She didn't feel like she belonged. The chambers were obscene in their luxury. Vaulted ceilings painted with constellations that actually moved, tracking real star patterns. Walls of living crystal that shifted from deep blue to soft silver, depending on her mood, currently a chaotic swirl of both. A bed large enough for 6 people, draped in silk that whispered against itself like water. And everywhere, the scent of night-blooming flowers and something else, something wild and masculine that made her wolf stir with recognition. His scent. The king had been here recently, marking the space as safe for his mate. The burns first, Ilara said, guiding Sera to a chair near the fireplace, which burned with silver flames that gave off no smoke. May I? Sera nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. The priestess's hands glowed with soft golden light as she touched Sera's throat. The pain that had been a constant companion for as long as she could remember began to fade, replaced by a tingling warmth. The collar did more than suppress your wolf, Ilara murmured, her mismatched eyes narrowing. It was actively burning you for years. The scarring goes deep, not just physical but spiritual. Your wolf was being slowly killed. Why? The question emerged as a whisper. Why would anyone do that? Because they feared what you could become. Ilara's healing light intensified. The moon-marked bloodline was legendary, child. Omegas born under the goddess's direct blessing, with power that could rival alphas. They could calm berserker wolves with a touch, could sense truth through lies, could bear children strong enough to reshape the paranormal world. The last known moon-marked Omega became queen 3,000 years ago and ushered in an age of unprecedented peace and prosperity. But they're extinct. You said so yourself. I said they were thought extinct. Ilara pulled back, the healing complete. Sera's throat felt normal for the first time in memory. No burning, no constant low-grade pain. The bloodline disappeared about 25 years ago. An entire family vanished overnight. There were rumors of assassination, of a conspiracy to prevent another moon-marked queen from rising. But no bodies were ever found. No proof discovered. 25 years. Sera was 23, maybe 24. You think I'm from that family? I think someone hid you very carefully, changed your identity, suppressed your nature, placed you where no one would look twice, among the servants. Ilara's expression was grave. The question is, who saved you and who wanted you dead? Before Sera could process that terrifying thought, a knock sounded at the door. One of the guards opened it to reveal a woman Sera had never seen before, tall, with silver-streaked auburn hair and eyes that held both warmth and steel. She wore practical leather armor rather than court finery, and moved with a warrior's grace. High Priestess. The woman bowed slightly. I'm Captain Lyra Stormwind, head of the King's personal guard. His Majesty has assigned me to Lady Sera's protection detail. Lady Sera, Sera repeated numbly. Hours ago she'd been girl, or you there, or nothing at all. Lyra's expression softened. It's an adjustment, I know, but you'll find your footing. She turned to Ilara. The King requests your presence in the council chambers. The interrogations have begun. After Ilara departed, Lyra settled into a chair across from Sera with the ease of someone comfortable in any situation. You must have questions. Thousands, Sera admitted, but I don't even know where to start. Start with the practical then. You're safe here. These chambers are warded with the strongest protective magic in the court. No one can enter without the King's permission or yours. You have a staff now. Ladies-in-waiting will arrive tomorrow to help you adjust. And you're no longer a servant, which means no more taking orders from people like Matron Vess. The thought of never seeing the matron's pinched, disapproving face again sent a wave of relief through Sera. What happens now? The King said something about a bonding ceremony. The formal mating ceremony, yes, it's tradition, a public declaration and magical binding, but His Majesty won't force it until you're ready. Lyra leaned forward. Can I speak plainly? Please. King Theron has waited 3 centuries for his true mate. 300 years of loneliness, of political machinations, of omegas throwing themselves at him for power rather than genuine connection. You are the answer to a weight that would have broken lesser wolves. Lyra's voice was gentle but firm. He will be patient with you, but his wolf is barely contained. The mating bond is pulling at both of you. The longer it remains incomplete, the more difficult it becomes. Sera felt heat rise in her cheeks. She knew what completing the bond meant. The stories servants whispered in the kitchens had been explicit enough. No one expects you to rush into anything, Lyra assured her. But you should know the King is not what the court sees. In public, he's the untouchable alpha, cold and calculating. In private, with those he trusts, he's different. Honorable. Kind, even. He will protect you with everything he has. Even from the court that doesn't want me. Especially from them. Lyra's smile was sharp. Which brings me to tomorrow. The King is hosting a gathering, smaller than the mating ceremony, but still significant. The noble families who weren't involved in the conspiracy, allies from other territories, members of the council who've proven loyal. You'll be introduced as his mate and future queen. Panic clawed at Sera's throat. I can't. I don't know how to be around nobles. I don't know the protocols, the politics, which is why I'm here. A new voice, bright and cheerful, came from the doorway. A young woman swept in, her energy filling the room like sunlight. She had wild copper curls, freckles across her nose, and eyes that sparkled with mischief. Sorry I'm late. The council chambers are in absolute chaos. It's glorious. Lady Kira Ashwood, Lyra introduced with a hint of exasperation. Daughter of the Eastern Territory Alpha, and unfortunately the King's cousin. Unfortunately? Kira pressed a hand to her chest in mock offense. I'm delightful. She turned to Sera, her smile genuine. And you, cousin-to-be, are the most interesting thing to happen to this court in decades. I'm here to help you navigate the shark-infested waters of paranormal nobility. I don't understand, Sera said. Why would you help me? Your nobility. I'm my true cousin's mate, which makes you family. Kira settled onto the bed with casual grace. Also, I've been watching the court's entitled omegas throw themselves at Theron for years, and it's been nauseating. You're different, real, and you have no idea how much power you actually hold, which is refreshing. I don't have any power. Wrong. Kira's expression turned serious. You're moon-marked, which means your wolf is stronger than you realize. You're the King's true mate, which gives you authority second only to his. And most importantly, you're an unknown variable in a court that's been stagnant for centuries. That terrifies them, which means you have leverage. Sera's head spun. I just want to understand what's happening. Yesterday I was invisible. Today I'm apparently at the center of some ancient conspiracy. Then let's start with what we know. Lyra pulled out a small leather journal. Lord Aldrich has confessed to being part of a group called the Preservation Council, nobles who believed moon-marked omegas were too powerful, too disruptive to the established hierarchy. 25 years ago, when your family was discovered, they acted. Acted how? They are still extracting details, but it appears they attacked your family's estate. Your parents were killed. You, as an infant, were supposed to die too, but someone, we don't know who, saved you. Hid you among the servant children, placed the suppression collar, erased your records. Sera's chest tightened. Parents. She'd had parents. A family. Why don't I remember any of it? The collar, Ilara had said earlier. It didn't just suppress your wolf. It suppressed everything connected to your true nature. Memories, instincts, even your sense of self. You were being slowly erased. But you survived, Kira added softly. And now you're here and the people who tried to destroy you are being dragged into the light. That's not nothing. A knock interrupted them. One of the guards opened the door to reveal a servant, not one Sera recognized, carrying an ornate wooden box. From His Majesty, the servant said, bowing low, for Lady Sera. Inside the box, nestled in black velvet, was a necklace. Not the iron and rowan collar that had burned her, but a delicate chain of silver and moonstone, with a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. Attached was a note in bold, masculine handwriting. This belonged to my mother. She was the strongest wolf I ever knew, and she would have loved you. Wear it tomorrow if you wish, or don't. The choice is always yours. T. Sera's fingers trembled as she touched the pendant. It was warm, pulsing with gentle magic. Protective, not suppressive. A gift, not a chain. He's courting you, Kira said with delight. Oh, this is precious. The terrifying Alpha King is courting his mate like a nervous adolescent. It's tradition, Lyra explained. Gifts, demonstrations of care, proving he can provide and protect. His wolf needs to show you he's worthy. He's a king, Sera said. I'm the one who's not worthy. Stop. Lyra's voice was sharp. That kind of thinking is what they programmed into you. You are moon-marked. You are his true mate. The moon goddess herself chose you. Start believing it. Sera looked at the necklace, then at the two women who'd somehow become her allies in the span of an hour. For the first time since the collar shattered, she felt something other than panic. She felt possibility. Okay, she said quietly. Teach me. I don't know how to be a queen, but I can learn. Kira's grin was fierce. That's the spirit. First lesson, tomorrow's gathering isn't just a party. It's a test. The nobles will be watching, judging, looking for weakness. Some will try to befriend you for political gain. Others will try to undermine you. Your job is to show them you're not the frightened servant they expect. How do I do that? By standing next to the most powerful alpha in existence and not flinching, Lyra said. By wearing his mother's necklace like you have every right to. By remembering that you survived 23 years of suppression and came out strong enough to be his mate. That's not weakness, that's steel. They worked through the night. Kira teaching her the names and allegiances of key nobles, Lyra drilling her on basic protocol, both of them sharing stories that made the paranormal world feel less alien. Sera learned that not all nobles were cruel, that the court had factions and alliances as complex as any human political system, that her position as the king's mate gave her power, but also made her a target. As dawn approached, painting the crystal walls with rose and gold, Sera stood before the massive mirror in her new chambers. The burns on her throat had healed to faint silver lines, scars that would fade but never fully disappear. Her hair, freed from the tight servant's bun, fell in dark waves past her shoulders, and around her neck, the moonstone pendant gleamed. She looked different, not quite a queen yet, but no longer invisible. He's going to lose his mind when he sees you, Kira predicted. Sera's wolf stirred in agreement, and for the first time, she didn't push it down. She let it rise. The royal gathering hall was smaller than the grand ceremonial hall, but no less impressive. Where the ceremony space had been designed for spectacle, this room whispered of power. Intimate, exclusive, dangerous. Walls of polished obsidian reflected floating candles that burned with different colored flames. Blue for truth, silver for loyalty, red for passion. The ceiling was spelled to show the actual night sky, stars wheeling overhead in real time. Sera stood at the entrance, her hand resting on Captain Lyra's armored forearm, trying to remember how to breathe. "You look perfect," Lyra murmured. "Now remember, you belong here. You are his mate. Act like it." The gown Kira had chosen was a masterpiece, midnight blue silk that seemed to absorb light, fitted to her waist before flowing like water. The neckline was high enough to be modest, but showed the moonstone pendant prominently. Her hair had been styled in an intricate braid, woven with silver thread. She looked like someone important. She felt like an imposter. "Lady Sera, the king's chosen mate," the herald announced, his voice magically amplified. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned. Sera forced herself to walk forward, each step measured, her chin raised the way Kira had taught her. The crowd parted, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed hostility. She recognized faces from yesterday's ceremony, rejected Omegas whose eyes held daggers, nobles whose expressions ranged from speculation to contempt, and at the far end of the hall, standing before a fireplace that burned with silver flames, was Theron. He'd been watching the door, waiting for her. When their eyes met, something passed between them, the mating bond pulling taut, singing with recognition. His formal attire was all black leather and silver embroidery, his hair pulled back to reveal the sharp angles of his face. He looked every inch the Alpha King, but his eyes were soft when they landed on her, warm, almost vulnerable. He crossed the room in long strides, ignoring everyone else, his focus absolute. When he reached her, he took her hand and brought it to his lips, a gesture both courtly and possessive. "You're wearing it," he said quietly, his thumb brushing the moonstone pendant. "It's beautiful," Sera replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Thank you. It suits you better than it ever did locked in a vault." His hand moved to the small of her back, a claiming touch that sent heat through her entire body. "Are you ready for this?" "No, but I'm here anyway." His smile was brief but genuine. "That's all I ask." He turned to address the room, his voice carrying effortlessly. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, the moon goddess has blessed me with my true mate, Lady Sera of the moon-marked bloodline, last of her family and my chosen queen." The silence that followed was loaded with unspoken thoughts. Then, slowly, nobles began to bow, some deeply and with apparent sincerity, others with the bare minimum of respect. "Your Majesty." A man stepped forward, older, with kind eyes and silver hair. "Lord Brennan of the Western Territory, may I say the moon goddess's timing is impeccable. We've needed a queen's wisdom in the court for far too long." "Thank you, Lord Brennan." Sera managed to smile, remembering Kira's briefing. Western Territory, loyal to the crown, lost his mate 20 years ago. Others approached with varying degrees of warmth. Lady Helena, a beta wolf who ran the court's extensive libraries, offered genuine congratulations. Lord Marcus, whose territory bordered hostile lands, assessed Sera with tactical interest before nodding approval. A handful of younger nobles, clearly curious about the servant-turned-queen, asked polite questions that Sera navigated with Kira's coaching echoing in her mind, but not everyone was welcoming. "How quaint." The voice dripped with venom. Lady Morgana Silvercrest emerged from the crowd, her gown an aggressive crimson, her smile sharp as broken glass. "A servant wearing the late Queen's jewels. I'm sure she's honored." The temperature in the room dropped. Theron's hand tightened on Sera's waist, but before he could speak, Sera found her voice. The king's mother was a warrior who united 3 territories and brought peace to a generation, she said, repeating what Kira had told her. "If wearing her necklace means I'm expected to show even a fraction of her strength and wisdom, then yes, I'm honored." Morgana's eyes narrowed. "Strength and wisdom typically require education. Tell me, can you even read the old laws? Or will you need them explained in small words?" "Lady Morgana." Theron's voice was soft, deadly. "You're dangerously close to insulting my mate in my presence. I suggest you reconsider your next words very carefully." "I'm simply concerned for the court's future, Your Majesty." Morgana's tone was honeyed poison. A queen must navigate complex politics, ancient traditions, delicate alliances. These are skills developed over lifetimes, not learned overnight. Perhaps Lady Sera would benefit from guidance. "I'd be happy to serve as an advisor." "What Lady Sera needs," a new voice interrupted, "is for social climbing vultures to stop circling." Kira appeared at Sera's other side, her smile bright and dangerous. "Hello, Morgana. Still bitter about the Nightshade accusation? Or is this about the king rejecting you in front of the entire court? Morgana's composure cracked. You forget yourself, Lady Kira. No, you forget yourself. Kira's voice hardened. Sera is the king's true mate, marked by the moon goddess herself. You're a noble who tried to poison her way to a throne. There's no comparison. Ladies. Lord Castellan materialized, his diplomatic smile firmly in place. Perhaps we should focus on celebration rather than conflict. Your Majesty, if I may, there are several territory leaders who wish to pay their respects. As Castellan guided them away from Morgana, Sera felt Theron's hand squeeze hers gently. You handled that well, he murmured. I wanted to run, she admitted. But you didn't. That's what matters. The evening progressed in a blur of introductions and careful conversations. Sera met Alpha Darius of the Northern Reaches, a massive wolf with surprisingly gentle manners. Lady Isolde, her ancient vampire who served as the court's historian, examined Sera with eyes that had seen millennia. A delegation of Fey nobles, their beauty almost painful to look at, offered cryptic congratulations that might have been blessings or curses. Through it all, Theron remained at her side, a constant, grounding presence. She began to notice things about him, the way he subtly positioned himself between her and anyone he didn't trust, how his thumb traced absent circles on her hand when he thought no one was watching, the way his eyes tracked her every movement, as though afraid she might disappear. You're staring, she whispered during a lull in conversation. I'm memorizing, he corrected. 3 centuries, Sera. I've waited 3 centuries, and you're here. Real. Mine. Forgive me if I can't quite believe it yet. The vulnerability in his voice made her chest ache. This wasn't just the terrifying Alpha King, this was a man who'd been alone for longer than she could comprehend. I'm not going anywhere, she said softly. His eyes blazed gold. Promise me. I promise. The moment shattered as commotion erupted near the entrance. Guards moved swiftly, and through the crowd Sera saw a figure being escorted in. Lord Aldrich, still in custody, but apparently required for some formal proceeding. Ah, perfect timing, Theron's voice carried across the hall. Lord Aldrich, how convenient. I was just about to announce the results of today's interrogations. Aldrich's face was pale, his usual aristocratic composure gone. Your Majesty, please, I've cooperated fully. You've confessed to conspiracy, murder and treason, Theron corrected coldly, but you've also provided valuable information. The names of your co-conspirators, for instance. He gestured, and guards brought forward 3 more nobles. 2 men and a woman, all looking terrified. Sera recognized one, Lady Beatrice, who'd served on the council for decades. The Preservation Council, Theron continued, his voice carrying to every corner. Nobles who decided that moon-marked Omegas were too dangerous to exist, who murdered Sera's family 25 years ago, who placed an infant in servitude with a collar designed to slowly kill her wolf. His eyes swept the room. They acted out of fear that a powerful Omega might disrupt their comfortable hierarchy, might challenge their authority, might remind them that true power comes from the moon goddess, not political maneuvering. We acted for stability, Lady Beatrice cried. The moon-marked line was too powerful, too unpredictable. You acted out of cowardice. Theron's voice cracked like a whip. And you will face justice. By the old laws, you are sentenced to exile, stripped of titles, lands, and pack bonds. You will live as rogues alone with no protection from the court you betrayed. The sentence was brutal. Rogues rarely survived long. Without pack bonds, without territory, they were vulnerable to everything from rival wolves to simple madness. Your Majesty, mercy, Aldrich began. I'm showing mercy by not executing you, Theron said flatly. My wolf wants your throat for what you did to my mate. Be grateful I'm civilized enough to follow the law. He turned to the guards. Take them. They have until dawn to leave court territory. As the conspirators were dragged away, the hall erupted in whispers. Sera felt the weight of dozens of eyes, reassessing, recalculating. The king had just made a very public statement. Anyone who threatened his mate would face absolute consequences. That was a message, Kira murmured from nearby. To everyone here. You're untouchable now. But Sera barely heard her, because across the room, Morgana was watching with an expression that sent chills down her spine. Not fear, but calculation. As though the exile of the conspirators had simply cleared the board for a new game. She's not done, Sera said quietly. Theron followed her gaze. No, but neither am I. He raised his voice again. One more announcement. In 3 days' time, we will hold the formal mating ceremony. Lady Sera will become queen, and the bond will be completed before the moon goddess and the court. 3 days. Sera's heart hammered. Until then, Theron continued, his hand finding hers again, she is under my protection. Any insult to her is an insult to me. Any threat against her is an act of war. I trust I'm clear. The message was unmistakable. The room filled with murmured acknowledgements, bows, careful neutrality. As the gathering began to disperse, Theron pulled Sera aside into a small alcove away from prying eyes. His hands cupped her face, his touch gentle despite the barely contained power radiating from him. 3 days, he said. I know it's fast. If you need more time, I don't. The words surprised her, but they were true. I'm terrified and I don't know what I'm doing, but I know this bond is real. I feel it every moment, and I don't want to fight it anymore. His forehead pressed against hers. You're sure? I'm sure. The kiss was inevitable, soft at first, questioning, then deepening as the mating bond flared between them. Sera felt her wolf rise to meet his, felt the rightness of it singing through every cell. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were pure gold. 3 days, he repeated, his voice rough, and then you're mine completely. 3 days, Sera agreed, and somewhere in the shadows, Morgana Silvercrest smiled. The 3 days before the mating ceremony passed in a whirlwind of preparation, politics, and discovery. Sera barely slept, her nights filled with dreams of silver wolves and ancient magic, her days consumed by lessons that transformed her from invisible servant to visible queen. Kira proved relentless in her tutoring. The court operates on 3 currencies, she explained, pacing Sera's chambers while dawnlight painted the crystal walls gold. Power, information, and alliances. You have power through Theron and your bloodline. Now, you need the rest. I don't understand politics, Sera protested, her head aching from memorizing noble lineages. Politics is just people wanting things and figuring out how to get them. You've survived years of navigating servant hierarchies. This is the same, just with better clothes and worse consequences. Kira dropped a stack of documents on the table. These are petitions that have been submitted to the Queen's office. It's been vacant for 3 centuries, so there's a backlog. Sera stared at the pile. What am I supposed to do with these? Read them, decide which have merit, present your recommendations to Theron. A queen isn't just decorative. She's supposed to balance the king's authority with compassion, to see problems he might miss, to give voice to those who can't reach him directly. The first petition was from a widow whose mate had died in border conflicts, requesting assistance for her children. The second was from a village dealing with rogue attacks. The third was a complaint about trade route taxation, real problems, real people. I can actually help with these, Sera said slowly. That's the idea. Kira's smile was approving. Power isn't just about commanding armies. Sometimes it's about making sure a widow gets support or a village gets protection. That's what the court has been missing. Someone who remembers what it's like to be powerless. High Priestess Ilara arrived each afternoon, teaching Sera about her moon-marked heritage. They sat in the temple gardens, surrounded by night-blooming flowers that opened even in daylight at Sera's presence. Your bloodline has gifts beyond strength, Ilara explained, watching as flowers turned towards Sera like she was the sun. Moon-marked omegas can sense truth through deception, can calm even the most feral wolf, can heal emotional wounds as easily as physical ones, but these abilities require training and, more importantly, acceptance of your true nature. I spent 23 years being told I was nothing, Sera said quietly. It's hard to suddenly believe I'm something. Then start small. Close your eyes. Feel your wolf, not as something separate but as part of you. She's been caged for so long she's afraid to fully emerge. Show her it's safe. Sera tried, reaching inward to the presence that had been awakening since the collar shattered. Her wolf was there, cautious, powerful, scarred but unbroken. I'm sorry, Sera thought to her. I'm sorry I didn't know you were there. The wolf's response was wordless but clear. We survived together. We heal together. When Sera opened her eyes, silver light was emanating from her skin, soft and ethereal. Ilara's expression was reverent. Moon-blessed indeed, the priestess whispered. Your power is waking, child. By the ceremony, you'll be ready. But not everyone was pleased with Sera's transformation. On the second day, while walking through the court gardens with Captain Lyra, Sera encountered a group of noble Omegas, including Morgana. They stood near a fountain, their conversation stopping abruptly when Sera approached. "Lady Sera," Morgana said, her tone saccharine, "how lovely to see you. We were just discussing the upcoming ceremony. Such a unique situation." "Unique how?" Sera kept her voice level, remembering Kira's advice. Never show weakness, never rise to obvious bait. "Well, typically a queen has years of preparation, education in law, diplomacy, history. You have, what, 3 days?" Morgana's smile was sharp. "I'm sure you'll do your best, but the court has standards, expectations. One wonders if love, or rather biology, is enough to overcome such deficiencies." The other Omegas tittered. Lyra's hand moved to her sword, but Sera touched her arm gently. "You're right," Sera said, surprising them. "I don't have years of preparation. I don't have your education or your experience navigating court politics." She stepped closer, and something in her presence made Morgana step back. "But I have something you'll never have. I'm his true mate. The moon goddess chose me not because of my bloodline or my education, but because my soul matches his. You can question my qualifications all you want, but you can't question destiny." Silver light flickered around her, unconscious, instinctive. The Omega's eyes widened. "The king chose you out of obligation," Morgana hissed, her composure cracking. "The mating bond is biological imperative, nothing more. Do you really think he'd look at you twice if not for that? You're a servant. You'll always be a servant no matter what crown they put on your head. And you're a bitter woman who tried to poison her way to power," Sera replied calmly. "At least I earned my place honestly." She walked away before Morgana could respond, her heart hammering but her head high. Lyra caught up, her expression caught between shock and admiration. "That was either very brave or very stupid," the captain said. "Probably both, but I'm tired of apologizing for existing." That evening, Theron found her in the library, a massive space filled with books that whispered to each other when no one was listening. She'd been reading about moon-marked queens, trying to understand the legacy she was inheriting. "You've been avoiding me," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "I've been preparing. There's a difference." But she closed the book, giving him her full attention. "Kira says I need to be ready for the ceremony. Ilara says I need to accept my power. Everyone has expectations, and I'm terrified of failing. You won't fail. You don't know that." "I do." He leaned forward, his gold eyes intense. "Because I've watched you these past 3 days. I've seen you read every petition with genuine care, seen you practice protocols until your feet ached, seen you stand up to Morgana when you could have stayed silent. You're already a queen, Sera. The ceremony just makes it official." "I confronted Morgana today," she admitted. "Probably made an enemy for life." "You already had an enemy. Now she knows you have teeth." His smile was proud. "What did you say to her?" Sera recounted the encounter, watching his expression shift from amusement to something darker when she repeated Morgana's words about obligation. "She's wrong," he said quietly. "The mating bond isn't obligation, it's recognition. My wolf knew you were mine the moment your scent hit the air, yes, but I've spent 3 days learning who you are beyond biology. Your compassion when reading those petitions, your determination to learn despite being terrified, the way you see people, really see them, because you know what it's like to be invisible." He took her hand. "The bond brought us together. But I'm choosing you, Sera. Every day, I choose you." The words broke something open in her chest. "I choose you too," she whispered. "Even though you're terrifying and ancient and way too powerful for comfort." His laugh was genuine, transforming his face. "I'm not that terrifying. You made Lord Aldrich wet himself during interrogation. He deserved it." Theron's expression sobered. "Speaking of which, we found something during the investigation. The person who saved you as an infant. We have a lead." Sera's breath caught. "Who?" "A servant who worked in your family's estate. She disappeared the night of the attack, and we assumed she'd been killed. But there are records of a woman matching her description entering court service around the same time, working in the nursery." He paused. "Her name was Mira. She died 5 years ago, but she left something behind. A letter sealed with instructions to deliver it to you if you ever manifested as moon-marked." He produced a worn envelope. The paper yellowed with age. Sera's hands trembled as she opened it. "My dearest child, if you're reading this, then you've survived. You've become what they tried to destroy. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth while I lived. The suppression collar was necessary to hide you, but it also bound my tongue. Any attempt to reveal your identity would have triggered the spell and killed us both. Your mother's name was Elena. Your father was Marcus. They loved you more than life itself, and they died protecting you. I was your nursemaid, and when the attackers came, your mother used the last of her power to hide you, to make you invisible to their magic. She begged me to keep you safe, to raise you as my own. I couldn't give you the life you deserved, but I gave you survival. The collar was agony to place on you. I heard your wolf cry out, felt her retreat into darkness, but it was the only way. They were hunting for a powerful Omega child. I gave them a powerless servant. You are moon-marked, blessed by the goddess herself. You carry your parents' strength, their compassion, their unbreakable will. When the collar breaks, and it will, when you're ready, embrace what you are. Don't let them make you small. I'm sorry I couldn't see the woman you'd become, but I know you'll be magnificent. With all my love, Mira. Tears streamed down Sera's face. Theron moved to her side, pulling her into his arms as she sobbed. For parents she couldn't remember, for a woman who'd sacrificed everything to save her, for the childhood stolen by fear and conspiracy. She loved you, Theron murmured into her hair. She gave you a chance at life. I don't even remember her, Sera choked out. 5 years ago she was here and I didn't know. I could have thanked her. She knew. Trust me, she knew. He held her tighter. And she'd be proud of who you've become. They stayed like that until Sera's tears subsided, until the grief transformed into something else. Determination. Her parents had died protecting her. Mira had lived in silence to keep her safe. She owed them more than fear and self-doubt. She owed them a queen worthy of their sacrifice. I'm ready, she said, pulling back to meet Theron's eyes. For the ceremony, for the bond, for all of it. I'm ready. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing away remaining tears. Tomorrow night, then, under the full moon, before the court and the goddess, I'll make you my queen, and no one will ever make you feel powerless again. Promise? I promise. The kiss was different this time, not tentative or questioning, but claiming. A preview of what tomorrow would bring. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Sera's wolf was singing with anticipation. One more day of being incomplete, and then everything would change. In her chambers that night, Sera stood before the mirror, wearing the moonstone pendant, her moon-marked symbols glowing faintly on her forearm. She looked like someone who belonged in this world of power and magic. She looked like a queen. Tomorrow, she whispered to her reflection, to her wolf, to the parents she'd never known. Tomorrow, I become who I was always meant to be. And in the shadows outside her window, Morgana Silvercrest watched, her expression cold with calculation. The ceremony would proceed. The servant would become queen. But Morgana had one final card to play, one that would either destroy Sera completely or reveal just how strong the moon-marked Omega truly was. Tomorrow would indeed change everything. The question was for whom? 6 months later, the Queen's Council chamber had become Sera's favorite room in the palace, not for its beauty, though the circular space with its domed ceiling of enchanted glass was breathtaking, but for what it represented. Here, twice weekly, she met with representatives from across the territories, farmers worried about drought, merchants navigating trade disputes, families seeking justice, wolves requesting sanctuary. Here she mattered. The northern village reports the rogue attacks have stopped completely, Captain Lyra announced, reviewing the latest dispatches. Your suggestion to station mixed packs, alphas, betas, and omegas working together has proven remarkably effective. Omegas aren't just for breeding and politics, Sera said, signing off on a resource allocation. We can fight, strategize, lead. The rogues weren't expecting organized resistance from wolves they'd been taught to underestimate. Kira, now officially serving as the Queen's advisor, grinned. You've started a revolution. Half the territories are restructuring their packs to include Omegas in leadership positions. The old guard is having collective heart attacks. Good. Sera's smile was sharp. She'd learned to wield power with precision over the past months, not through cruelty, but through unwavering conviction. If tradition means keeping half our population powerless, then tradition needs to change. The mating ceremony 6 months ago had been complicated. Sera remembered standing in the Grand Temple, wearing a gown of silver and midnight blue, the moonstone pendant at her throat, and her moon-marked symbols glowing like starlight. The court had gathered, thousands of wolves, vampires, fae, and other paranormal beings, all watching as she and Theron stood before High Priestess Ilara under the full moon. The ceremony itself had been beautiful. Ancient vows spoken in the old tongue, the exchange of blood and breath that sealed the mate bond, the moment when silver light had exploded from both of them as their wolves finally, completely merged. But just as Ilara had raised her hands to pronounce them bonded, Morgana had made her move. "I challenge the bond!" she'd screamed, her voice magically amplified. "By the old laws I invoke the right of contest." The right of contest, an ancient law allowing any wolf to challenge a mating if they believed it false or politically dangerous. It required the challenged Omega to prove their worth through 3 trials: mind, body, and spirit. Theron had nearly killed Morgana on the spot. Only Sera's hand on his arm had stopped him. "I accept," Sera had said calmly, though her heart hammered. "Name the trials." The trial of mind had come first, a test of political acumen, where Sera had to navigate a simulated crisis, territory disputes, resource shortages, potential war. She'd drawn on everything Kira taught her, every petition she'd read, every lesson learned from watching Theron lead. She'd found solutions that balanced strength with compassion, justice with mercy. The judges, neutral alphas from distant territories, had declared her victorious. The trial of body had been brutal, single combat against Morgana herself. Sera had never fought before, had barely begun training with Lyra, but her moon-marked power had awakened fully during the ceremony, and her wolf was done being caged. The fight had lasted 7 minutes. Sera had moved with instincts she didn't know she possessed, her smaller frame an advantage against Morgana's aggressive style. When Morgana had lunged for her throat, Sera had sidestepped and used the larger woman's momentum against her, pinning her to the ground with a hand wrapped around her throat. "Yield," Sera had growled, her eyes silver with her wolf's presence. Morgana had yielded. The trial of spirit had been the hardest. Sera had to enter a trance state and commune directly with the moon goddess, proving her bond with Theron was divinely blessed. She'd walked through visions of possible futures, some where she failed, where the court rejected her, where she broke under pressure. But in each vision, one constant remained: Theron, standing beside her, his faith in her unshakable. When she'd emerged from the trance, silver tears streaming down her face, the moon goddess's voice had echoed through the temple: "She is mine. She is his. She is queen." Even Morgana couldn't argue with divine proclamation. The bonding had completed at dawn, in Theron's private chambers, with only the moon as witness. Sera remembered the intensity of it, the way the mate bond had snapped fully into place, the overwhelming sensation of being known completely, the moment when she'd understood that she and Theron were no longer 2 separate beings, but one soul, in 2 bodies. She'd woken in his arms, marked and mated, and irrevocably changed. "You're smiling," Lyra observed, pulling Sera from her memories. "Thinking about the king. Is it that obvious? You get this look, soft and fierce at the same time. It's disgustingly romantic." But Lyra's tone was fond. "He's in the training yards, by the way, terrorizing new recruits." Sera laughed. "I should rescue them." She found Theron exactly where Lyra predicted, shirtless and sparring with 3 warriors simultaneously. Even after 6 months, the sight of him still made her breath catch, all lethal grace and controlled power, his body a weapon honed over centuries. He sensed her immediately, his head turning, his eyes finding hers across the yard. The bond between them hummed with warmth. "My queen," his voice whispered through their mental link, another gift of the completed bond. "My king," she replied, warmth flooding through her. "Stop showing off." "I'm not showing off. I'm demonstrating proper technique. You're demonstrating that you're an immortal alpha who enjoys making younger wolves feel inadequate." His laugh echoed through the bond as he disarmed all 3 opponents with casual efficiency. "Enough for today," he told them. "Practice those defensive stances. And remember, strength without strategy is just flailing." The recruits bowed and scattered. Theron crossed to Sera, still radiating heat from exertion, and pulled her into his arms despite being sweaty. "You're disgusting," she protested without conviction. "You love it." He kissed her temple. "How was the council session?" "Productive. The northern villages are secure, the trade dispute with the Eastern Territory is resolved, and I've approved funding for 3 new schools." "Schools?" His eyebrow raised. Education shouldn't be limited to nobles. If we want strong territories, we need educated populations. Wolves who can read, write, think critically. I'm starting with villages that have never had access to formal learning. Pride radiated through the bond. You're reshaping the court. I'm trying to make it better. There's a difference. She pulled back to look at him. Speaking of which, I received a petition this morning. From Morgana. His expression darkened instantly. What does she want? Reinstatement. She's been living in exile for 6 months and apparently she's changed. The petition includes testimonials from the village where she's been staying, saying she's helped with rogue problems, taught self-defense to Omegas, even donated her remaining wealth to rebuild homes damaged in attacks. It's a manipulation. Maybe. Or maybe losing everything actually taught her something. Sera touched his face gently. I'm not saying we trust her, but the old laws allow for redemption. If she's genuinely trying to atone, shouldn't we at least investigate? Theron was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. Finally, you're too compassionate. You're too suspicious. I'm suspicious because people have spent centuries trying to manipulate or kill me. You're compassionate because you remember what it's like to be powerless and want to give others chances you never had. He sighed. Fine. Send investigators. If her reformation is genuine, we'll consider limited reinstatement. But she comes nowhere near you without a full security detail. Deal. Sera kissed him softly. This is why we work. You're the sword. I'm the shield. I thought I was the shield. We're both. That's the point. They walked back to the palace together, hands intertwined, the bond between them a constant warm presence. Sera marveled at how natural this had become. Being queen, being his mate, being powerful. 6 months ago, she'd been terrified of her own shadow. Now she made decisions that affected thousands, stood before the court without flinching, and wore her crown like it had always belonged to her. That evening they hosted a private dinner with their inner circle. Kira and her new mate, a beta warrior who matched her energy perfectly, Lyra and Lord Brennan, whose friendship had blossomed into something more, High Priestess Ilara, and Lord Castellan, who'd proven himself loyal despite his initial doubts. To Queen Sera, Brennan raised his glass, who in 6 months has accomplished what centuries of kings couldn't, making the court remember its heart. To both of them, Kira corrected. Because, let's be honest, Theron was a terrifying ice block before Sera melted him. I was not an ice block, Theron protested. You made grown alphas cry during council sessions, Castellan pointed out. They deserved it. See, ice block. But Kira's smile was affectionate. Now you actually smile. It's disturbing but also kind of sweet. Sera laughed, leaning into Theron's side. These people had become her family, the family she'd never had, the belonging she'd always craved. Later, alone in their chambers, Theron pulled Sera onto the balcony overlooking the court. The city below sparkled with magical lights, thousands of lives continuing under their protection. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. The ceremony, the trials, the responsibility. Never. She turned to face him. 6 months ago, I was invisible. Now I matter. I help people. I make a difference. Yes, it's overwhelming sometimes, and yes, there are days I want to hide in the library and never come out. But this life, with you, leading together, it's everything I never knew I needed. His arms wrapped around her, solid and safe. I spent 3 centuries alone, convinced I'd never find my mate. Then you stumbled into that ceremony with a wine tray, and my entire world rewrote itself. His voice roughened. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Sera. My queen, my mate, my everything. She kissed him, pouring 6 months of love and trust and partnership into it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, her eyes were silver and his were gold, their wolves as connected as their human selves. Come to bed, she whispered. Your queen commands it. His laugh was low and promising. As my queen wishes. Much later, wrapped in silk sheets with Theron's steady heartbeat beneath her ear, Sera thought about Mira's letter. Don't let them make you small, she'd written. Sera hadn't. She'd bloomed exactly where she'd been planted, in a court that hadn't wanted her, beside a king who'd waited centuries for her, into a queen who would reshape the paranormal world with compassion and steel. And as she drifted to sleep, the moon goddess's blessing warm in her chest, Sera smiled. She was exactly where she belonged. Epilogue. 1 year after the mating ceremony, Queen Sera stood before the Grand Council, her hand resting on the slight swell of her stomach. and announced the news that would secure the lunar court's future. An heir was coming, moon-marked and powerful, the first of a new generation. Beside her, King Theron's hand covered hers, his expression fierce with pride and protection. And in the back of the hall, Morgana Silvercrest, reinstated after proving her reformation genuine, now serving as the Queen's unlikely ally, smiled with something that might have been genuine happiness. The servant who became Queen had done more than survive. She'd thrived, and the paranormal world would never be the same. Thank you for joining Sera and Theron's journey. If you enjoyed this story of transformation, true mates, and finding power in unexpected places, please subscribe for more paranormal romance tales. Leave a comment telling us where you're listening from. We love hearing from our global audience. And share this story with anyone who believes in second chances and the power of destiny. Until next time, may you bloom wherever you're planted.